My name is Chris Clements. I am a forensic accountancy partner at Thornton, based here in Leeds. And I've got a series of things that I'm going to talk to you tonight about, all around the area of fraud in the world of business. So we're going to start off roughly looking at around about four main areas. First of all, setting the scene, thinking about the types of frauds, some of the threats that businesses actually face in the real world. Then we're going to move on to spotting some of the signs of fraud, some of the key things that people in business can actually pick up themselves. Followed up by investigation. Now this is something that I've kind of brushed through in the past and I'm going to concentrate a little bit more on today. And then finally going to look at the actual cost of fraud, because I think it is really important. People consider fraud to be a victimless crime, but I'm going to give you a few real life examples of businesses that have actually suffered very, very badly as a result of fraud. So without further ado, let's have a look quickly at some of the types of fraud that I come across. And the one at the top there, I mean, this is listed in alphabetical order, but the one at the top there, bank mandate fraud, is the most common fraud that I come across at the moment. This is where businesses are rung up by fraudsters and said, just change the bank details for your next transaction that's going to be paid out to this number here. The money's then transferred through and then it goes and disappears. Now, two things from that. First of all, when you're out there, you think, I'm not stupid enough to actually fall for someone ringing me up. Well, actually, let's change the context. Actually, these boys are very, very clever. They sit there and they link and think about exactly what you and your businesses are actually doing. They look on the websites, they look at the press releases, they identify larger businesses, they identify large public sector organisations that are going to have a large financial transaction, often related to some kind of capital expenditure, so building new premises, expanding the business, getting new items of plant or equipment. They will then sit there and identify what business is actually supplying those. They will do a lot of preparation for it. They will identify who within that business, the supplier business, they can impersonate. They will create fictitious websites and identities. They will use things like Colombian email addresses, .co rather than .co.uk, so it's very easy to replicate. They will then sit there and try to ring through to the accounts department, and they won't sit there and ring up straight away and say, I want to change the bank details. They will actually come in there and say, we need to get to know you a little bit better. Can we talk through some of your issues? How can we serve you better? What sort of things? They will get to know the account staff. They will get to know the account staff well. Some of them they've got to know the account staff birthdays. They've sent flowers on people's birthday. They've got things so that they actually know, and people believe that they are actually working for that business. And during the course of those conversations, they will plant a seed in the victim's mind. They will plant seeds saying, we're about to move premises. We're going to move to a new location coming up. They may even present and produce invitations so that people will attend that new opening office. Often they'll be moving very far away, so a business being attacked here in Leeds may be invited to an opening of the new premises in Plymouth, somewhere sufficiently far away that it's very unlikely that someone would ever try and attend. And then right at the last minute, they'll ring up and go, crikey, you know we're just moving into these new premises. You're never going to believe it. We've had to change our bank because there's not one of the local ones that we've used. You're going to have to change our bank details because there's big transactions just coming up. And they will know that there will be a big transaction. They will have done their research. They will know that there will be a final payment. And there are businesses out there, there are public sector organisations who have fallen for this. And have fallen for this in a big way. The largest of which I know about was just shy of £10 million was diverted from an NHS body. It's a very significant fraud, it's a very significant threat, and it is a proper long-term fraud. Bribery and corruption. The backhanders, the brown paper envelopes that you think. I astonishingly had it myself. I was giving a lecture like this and someone gave me a very kind thank you present in a brown envelope, which I thought was very apposite. But anyway.
You won't get that from here.
I'm not going to get that, no. Yeah. I love the way you all laugh. You know how tight it is now, don't you? Dead man frauds. Those are where there's employees being paid who don't actually exist. Sometimes the employees did exist. In fact, these frauds actually often start off by accident, where someone in the payroll department realises that an individual has left the business is still getting paid. And they realise that actually, rather than closing that individual down as should have happened, it's much easier just changing the bank details of where that's being paid to actually move it into their own account. That often happens. So creating fictitious fake employees. Basic expenses fraud. People sitting there fiddling their accounts, their results, their expenses, so that they fill out the forms and they claim things. Now, it can be as simple as people claiming fake receipts, people just sitting there adding additional amounts, or just say, oh, I lost the receipt for a certain payment. Very, very simple types of fraud. But it can be extremely complicated. I dealt with a managing director and his finance director of a large corporate business. Now, they had run that business as their own piggy bank for many, many years. And they continued to do so after they'd sold out to someone else. And what they had, and the sort of things they did, they had fully expensed cars. So they had everything paid for. Corporate credit card, petrol receipts went on that. So there was nothing that they had to pay for. Now, that should have been where any of the rest of us, I'd like to think in this room, we draw the line. We say that's all we're going to do. That's all we're going to claim. But no, not these boys. They would claim mileage on top at £1.50 a mile. And you would have thought that would have been enough. No, it wasn't. They sat there, they got the petrol receipts, and they submitted those as well. They were being paid on a company credit card. They were getting paid 3 times for the same thing. Anyway, you would have thought that was enough. There was loads of other things that they were doing. But anyway, I was interviewing them because I wanted to find out what they were doing. They'd done loads and loads of different things with this business. So I met them at a glamorous location. I think it was a travel lodge just off the M1. You think this isn't all sex, rock and roll, this whole thing. It's a much tougher job than that. So in the hotel, we interviewed them in a hotel room, and afterwards we took them outside, and they obviously they turned up in really shabby suits, and they were all going, we're so poor, we can't afford anything. No, we couldn't possibly be filling our expenses receipts. We wouldn't do that. It was all an accident, all big mistake. And so having done that and turned up in their shabby suits, the managing director, who had obviously played along, he got to his dirty old Volvo outside. Oh, God, it starts. It's never starting. This thing is so old and decrepit, but I can't afford anything else. I knew it was a lie because he had a farm in the Cotswolds, and not a small one either. And anyway, the finance director obviously hadn't got the memo about turning up in your old car. Because he sits there and drives around the corner, and presumably thought that we would sit there and just go back inside the hotel. We did. We hung around outside just to see what he was going to drive away in. And we were not surprised to see that he turned up in his Maserati. Number plate was Vince. Not bad going. Anyway, so you've got expenses forward. You've got fresh air invoices. These are just fake invoices, so people invoicing for goods and services that are not provided. Now, those are very, very simple frauds that can be committed, often VAT-only invoices with a little note, forgot to do it on our training invoice from last month, something like that. A couple of £100, normally within people's authorisation limits. It just goes and gets swept under the way. Particularly the VAT-only ones, they seem as though it's not really an issue to look at. So fresh air invoicing. Money laundering. It's very easy for organisations to get caught up in money laundering, particularly education establishments regularly get caught up in money laundering. They are used because people supply funds for paying for their education. They'll try and pay 3 years' worth of tuition up front. About 2 weeks into the course, they'll say, oh no, sorry, decided I don't want to do this anymore, and ask for their money back. Now, what they're doing is they're actually layering significant amounts of funds through the system. But education bodies regularly get caught out by this thing and regularly brought into it. I dealt with one, not here in Leeds, but one in Yorkshire, where I was sitting there. I was giving a sort of a training talk to the senior management team. So the finance director and the financial controller were there, and I said this. I said, look, as an organisation, you will have people trying to use you for money laundering. And the finance director said, put his hand, said, Chris, it does not happen at this organisation. We've got strict policies, we've got controls. It can never happen. Which point his financial controller just pulled him down and went, Chris, continue on. We do have a problem with money laundering in this organisation. So it is there. It's there available. The final one on the list, theft of data and information. The secret formula for Coke, all that kind of things, those have got value. They've got huge commercial values. But so does customer names, details of suppliers, details of pricing. All of these have a certain amount of value there. And it's basic theft. And that's what the coppers call fraud. Fraud is just clever nicking. It is just theft. So it's not just as simple as that. But then these are very much old school. The new stuff that's coming through is cyber fraud. And when I say new, it's obviously been around for sort of 10, 15 years now, but it's become increasingly prevalent. The viruses, the malwares, ransomwares that are being out there, the stuff that's been in the press about Sony being hacked and all stuff. And the fact that it was all supposedly created by North Korea doing it. But I think the understanding now is it's quite clearly not North Korea who are doing it, that it was blatantly obvious when you kind of made in North Korea as one of the sort of lines of coding that someone's trying to throw them off the scent. But you've got people, there's some of the stuff that's hit. I don't know if people heard about the Iranian nuclear reactors were targeted. Nuclear reactors! How scary is that? I wouldn't want to live in anyway, Windscale or anywhere like those places. Anyway, these things are targeted and hit to do maximum damage. Criminal gangs targeting organisations. There was a series of thefts and attempted thefts, finally uncovered among one of the major high street banks, where you had people coming in, again, quite old school fraud, coming in, saying we're here to sort out the computers. Generally, apparently, they'd been allowed into most of these organisations, and what they were doing is they were just putting different coding in to try and divert funds out of them. The Lebanese loop, basically it's a fancy name for the cash machine scams. Very straightforward, very simple, some of which are just sitting there looking over people's shoulder to try and get the PIN numbers and clone them using some kind of cloning machine, or even just as simple as knocking people on the head and nicking their cards. But there's some significant stuff out there, particularly chip and PIN. Here in Leeds, a number of the petrol stations were targeted by people doing it using chip and PIN to clone people's cards. And then USB memory sticks. You see, the fraudsters sat there and thought, well, it's getting quite difficult to try and get into the major high street banks. They've all worked out that we can sit there, and there's cameras on all these things. How can we sit there and get people information onto people's computers? What's the easiest way of doing it? Well, what we can do is we can give it away. So what they do is they sit there and say, what's the easiest possible way of getting hold of information on loads of people's different laptops at the same time? Well, what they do is they set up a supposedly legitimate business printing memory sticks. So you get a memory stick that's given to you at a conference. You don't know who it's been printed by. You don't know who it's been prepared by. Organisations, organised fraud out there has actually set up fake businesses, creating memory sticks with printers, and they're printing the details on there. They're providing the slides and all the programs and all the handouts and all these lovely things, but they're also putting viruses, malware and other things on those as well. If they're specifically targeting organisations, they will leave a memory stick or so in the car park. And the idea is that someone will find it in the attempt to pick up who it is. The receptionist will put it into their computer to see whether they can find out who it's from, whether they can return it to the rightful owner. On there will be a virus which will be deliberately designed to target that business. These are very, very sophisticated people. You've got to remember, these are the individuals who 30 years ago were knocking off the Halifax with a sawn-off shotgun. These are seriously nasty individuals, and they are targeting each and every one of you. So my advice is, if you sit there and find a memory stick on the floor, don't take it. If you get offered at a conference a free memory stick, don't take it. Don't do it because you don't know what's on it. Okay, would you spot a fraudster? Now, for those who've heard me before, you will know the answer to this. According to psychologists, within this room of very honest, upright members of the public, what proportion would be capable of committing fraud? You're all chuckling. It's almost as though you believe that you're all bent already. Okay, who's naive enough to think it's 0 to 25%? Who thinks it's stupid enough to believe it's 26 to 50%? Who think it's a complete buffoon to think it's just 51 to 75%? Oh yes, you're far too nice, madam. You still actually believe that people are nice and cuddly. Sadly, you are not. You are all bent. You're all crooks. And it is such a simple way of testing these things. For those who've not heard me before, I'm going to gloss over because I do speak about this every time I stand up, but it's an important message. There's a simple test. First of all, basically, can you be bought? £1,000, 99% chance of getting caught. You're not going to take it, are you? Nah. Okay, £100,000, 50% chance of getting caught. Would you take it? I think a couple of years ago, someone said yes at that. I was slightly worried about it. £1 million, 1% chance of getting caught. Would you take it? Ah, you see, you are realising you're all crooks. £10 million, 0.1%. Go on, £100 million, 0.01. Getting caught. You are all crooks. But some of you, there will be one or two people in this room who will be going, no, I am not. I am not a crook. I am innocent. I would never take the money. I don't want to be separated from my mum, my nan, my kids, whatever it is. Okay, fine, let's change the scenario. Your mum, your nan, your kids, just spoken about, one of them or all of them are sick. They need £100,000 for an operation. You haven't got the money. Would you take it? Makes you think, doesn't it? Right, and this leads on to the psychology behind it. Why does it happen? Well, there's a thing called the fraud triangle. It's been around since the 1940s. It's been around for a very long time. But it's an interesting set of things to bring together. First of all, we've got to have that incentive, that motive to actually do it. And it might be greed, it might be the fact that you've got, you need the money for drugs, you need to pay for a gambling habit, you need to sit there and pay off your mistress, whatever it might be. I say mistress, I know, I'm sorry boys, I'm tarring you all with the brush, but I know you're useless with these things, so it normally is you who are paying for the mistresses. Although I did know there was a school that I dealt with where the headmistress had bought a house to pay for the school's gardener to live just on site, so that at lunchtimes. Anyway, then the next thing you do is you have to have an opportunity. So you have to have that chance. That £1,000, that £100,000, that £1 million, that £10 million, that £100 million has to be there ready for you to take. So you have to have that chance to do it. So you have to have those controls. And indeed, there's lots of people who trot out statistics on a regular basis going, say, fraudsters are all middle-aged men in middle to senior management positions. And so you can spot them quite easily because they all look like Clements. Yes, they do. The reality is that actually, generally, people who are in a position to have that opportunity, who can override the systems, override those controls, and can take money, they are actually middle-aged men in that kind of middle to senior management. Those are the ones who can actually do the frauds. And then finally, there's the point of rationalising the act. I can justify it. I'm entitled to it. And this is one of the really important things that actually is that when you're trying to prevent fraud, you have to understand, if you can prevent people having that rationalisation, then you can really help prevent fraud. If people can sit down and say, actually, I'm not entitled to take that money. I'm not entitled to submit 3 lots of expenses. I'm not entitled to take the secret formula. I'm not entitled to the customer list. Then you can help prevent fraud. And the final point on there is there has to be a general belief that there's a low risk of detection. And that's that point, and why I said originally when you're looking at the money, if you're looking at a 99% chance of getting caught and being detected effectively, most people aren't going to do it because most people aren't stupid. But astonishingly enough, there is a proportion of people, they are known as corporate psychopaths, who will actually do it, even at that 99% chance of getting caught, because there is a chance of getting away with it. They will actually give it a go. And it's a significant proportion of the population. It's about 5%. Now, there's 100 people in this room, and 5 of you are really bent. Okay, red flags. How are we going to look at a few of those? 3 separate areas. Behavioural, around what you do. Transactions, what things you're actually doing. And then systems around what you're actually using. So the behavioural ones. Living beyond your means. It is often a clear indication. I know that people have heard me before, that they will know that I've had 2 examples previously of people turning up with Lamborghinis and stuff like that to work when they were only being paid about £20,000 a year. I have had those real life examples. But there was an individual who was convicted earlier this year. It was early in January. This individual was convicted of turning up to work in a Ferrari. Now, he obviously was really, really stupid because he was a serving police officer. He was covering up for his brother and his cousin who were running a brothel. And he was taking the backhanders from that. Look out for financial difficulties. People who've got financial problems, people who are struggling for money, any kind of thing that will drive someone to do it. If they are struggling to pay their bills, that will be a problem. And again, if you're looking to prevent fraud, if you see members of your team who are struggling for funds, try and help them out. Try and do it because it just reduces that motivation. Close associations with customers. There are people out there on a regular basis where they will try and get close to you in the same way as the fraudsters who were looking to try and get close for those bank mandate frauds. Individuals will try and look, if they want that secret formula for Coke, they will try to get close to them. There was a guy who was at Sainsbury's who was buying their potatoes. That guy was taking regular backhands from their supplier. And as a result, Sainsbury's was paying significant amounts over the odds for their potatoes. Not just because the guy was paying the amount that this business was asking for because he'd been entertained, but also because that business was then invoicing Sainsbury's for the cost of bribing their own employee, which I thought was really cheeky. Overly controlling individuals. Those corporate psychopaths, they're not just your average individual. They're not your Joe Smuck who's going to sit there and knock you over the head. These can be very, very charming individuals. They can be very bright, managing directors, owners of businesses, people who often can be very successful because they can do, but they will have a temper. They can be a bully. They will be aggressive. They will have all those tendencies as well of a psychopath, a lack of empathy, a lack of understanding as to why they shouldn't be entitled to funds. They may work excessively long hours. I'm not saying that hard work is a bad thing, but fraudsters need to cover up their actions. So they often work late at night because they don't want people looking over their shoulders. And for the same reason, they may not take holidays. So then transactional red flags. So these are the things that actually appear in the books and records. You've got significant excessive year-end transactions where people are hiding fraudulent transactions among genuine ones. And again, the worst example was a single journal that I came across once where there was one fraudulent transaction in there, but it was 165,000 lines long. Someone churning funds around and around and around to try and hide up the one fraudulent transaction. Significant credit notes being issued after the year, and that's often a case of people trying to increase turnover, trying to keep the bank from the door, something like that. I touched on journals before. Journals are the most common way that fraudster will conceal their actions, because what you have is you have cash going out of one part of the business, you have to hide it somewhere else. So the easiest way is to keep on moving it around and around and around. So I saw a business where they'd hidden it in fixed assets. So they actually found that they had premises that had, according to the books and records, had 4 roofs. All on one building. Think about that. Transactions below the authority limits. So people, if you can sign off £500, £100, £20 without someone doing it, then transactions will fall immediately below that. And then transactions with high risk locations or industries, because there's certain industries that are just more prevalent. Often industries that involve large quantities of cash. Businesses that involve large quantities of subcontracts. So things like the construction industry, as unfortunately has a significant prevalence of fraud just because it is a significant number of people who are dealing in cash. And then system flags. Transactions at odd times of day, that comes with the people working late. You can flag up the things that are happening at odd different points in the day. Weak reconciliations and failure to review exception reports. For any of you who are thinking of getting into a career in accountancy, the strongest test that I can recommend is regular reconciliations. Checking that the banks, according to the bank reconciliation, the external third-party records match with what you've got according to your own accounting records. Fundamental test of systems and controls. Looking for people exporting information. We almost certainly, I would imagine everyone in this room has got a mobile phone, and every single person will have some kind of recording device on there. At the very least, will probably have a camera. There will be a ways of extracting significant amounts of information on that, onto their iPad, onto their personal computer, and taking out the business. And then attempts regularly to breach data security. Those fraudsters, they will keep on attempting to break a business, break a code, find out what things are going. And once they've done it once, they will do it again. They will do it just as easily with individuals. You may have heard of the suckers lists that are for sale on the internet. You can buy lists of people who are suckers for frauds, who will sit there and actually believe they've won the Nigerian lottery. One of those is my mum, by the way. So embarrassing. Right, top method of identifying fraud. Who thinks most frauds are found by accident? There's a few people think it's accident, which I think is a good guess. Who thinks it's to do with external auditors? Obviously, I work for a firm of external auditors, so they've obviously got to be really good, important, and no, none of you actually believe that we do a good job at all. And you're absolutely right, I'm not giving anything away. Who thinks management spotted? No, that's the managers in the room, isn't it? So, yeah. And whistleblowing, which is presumably most of you. Good. It is a regular thing. There's a organisation called the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, ACFE, and they do a report to the nations every single year. And this is not just for frauds in the UK, this is global frauds. And every single year that they've run this, whistleblowing has been top. And whistleblowing has always been top in the 40 or something %. So if you have a strong whistleblowing policy, if you have a strong whistleblowing hotline, an independent whistleblowing hotline, and not just the fact the boss saying that doors always open, that doesn't work. They need to know that they can talk openly, honestly, and without fear of retribution. Then you have a real method of spotting frauds that have happened. So I said that I'd talk a lot about investigations. And what I've got is I tried to get it down to 11 steps, but I could 10 steps, but I couldn't. It's 11 steps. So the first thing to do in an investigation, if you are sitting there in my shoes, the first thing you do is do nothing. You've got to make sure that you understand exactly what your fraud response plan is going to be. Most decent organisations will have a fraud response plan. They will know what to do, who to call, what order they should be doing things. And never, ever, ever touch a computer. If you start messing around with the computers, even just the action of switching it off could be seen as tampering with evidence. You have to be very, very careful with what you do. And I hate it when I've had people, we just had a rummage around to see what we could find on his computer. Because what you're doing is you are messing around with evidence. It would be the same as if this was papers and someone was sitting there going, saying, well, I didn't touch it, I just had a look through and it was all fine there. Yeah, I haven't changed anything, have I? It's all fine, yeah. And then you find you've broken everything around the back there, just like I've done. But this is absolutely a clear problem. Never, ever do anything with computers. You wouldn't necessarily mess around with things. You wouldn't go rummaging around in someone's desk. So don't go rummaging around in their computers. Follow those internal procedures. Make sure you're following the employee manual. If you've got an employee manual, you've got contracts of employment, your employees will know what to do. And if you breach those, a decent employment lawyer will jump on you. And then the last thing you want to do is find a fraudster is suing you for wrongful dismissal. And they do. And some of them get away with it. Make sure that you're following your formal disciplinary procedures, but then also make sure that you're ready with PR advice. Some of the first things you do if it's a major fraud, particularly within a public interest organisation, is to make sure you've got your PR right. Last thing you want to do is find yourself on the front page of the Yorkshire Post of being having some major fraud issue and not have a response and not know who to send out, not know what to say, how far you can actually go with it. Only then should you start trying to find out what's happened. First of all, you just need to find out the context. So how's things actually happened? How did it come out? Was it a whistleblowing hotline? Was it someone talking directly to you? Did it come out by some other method? Was it a client or a customer sitting there telling you that they were concerned about backhanders? Think about who's actually doing it, what kind of position they are in the organisation. How embarrassing, how difficult it's going to be. Who else might be involved? Think about disciplinary action. Should you be sitting there immediately suspending people? I can remember I was rung up at the end of last year by a client who said, right, I heard you speak, Chris, on fraud investigations. I haven't touched the computer of the fraudster. I haven't done anything with any of the evidence. I said, right, okay, you next thing you've got to do is be really, really careful before you actually start interviewing or do anything else with the individual. Make sure you're following your procedures. What evidence, what are the disciplinary procedures, what's the things you're following around? You say, oh no, I fired her. No, you haven't listened to what I'm saying. Don't start firing. Think about going through the proper procedures. Do you know that that's the only individual involved? Do you know whether there's anyone else there? What sort of evidence can you actually locate? How can you secure it? Is the evidence going to be at the individual's house? What do you know about their lifestyle? Then you think about what's the appropriate specialist. But before you think about the appropriate specialist, think about what your outcome's going to be. What would good look like for you? If you're sitting there deciding that good will be recovery of all the money, because the first thing I normally get is we want a public hanging. We want to get the cash back and we want a public hanging. We want to get this person out. We want to make an example of them. But that's probably not the best advice always. You may sit there and very well want to put someone up on a public pillory and make an example of them. But if you do that, you might be breaching their employee rights. You might have got the wrong person. You might be risking a later criminal prosecution. You've got to be very, very careful about what you're doing. Do you need to think about digital forensics, securing those computers professionally? Are you working in a regulated sector? Because if you're a charity or you're in the public sector, you may have a duty to investigate under some of your charters. What kind of tax implications might you be? If you've been creating fictitious invoices, paying out fictitious amounts, that's been reducing your profits. You've got reduced profits. You've been telling the taxman the wrong number, maybe for years. And if you're doing that, then you've got a serious problem long term. You've got to think about good quality legal advice. Now, if there's any lawyers in the room, you'll love this bit, because lawyers are the only people who can get you what's known as legal and professional privilege. That means that you can tell them something and nobody else needs to know. So you can keep everything completely under control. They don't have to disclose the details to the police. If someone comes to me without legal and professional privilege, or does correspondence directly with me without copying the lawyer, then I have a professional duty to report that. And that can mean that things escape out into the press. That's where you end up on the front page of the Yorkshire Post. Obviously, I have to report it through the appropriate systems to the police. I don't report it to the Yorkshire Post, just in case anyone's worrying about that. Public sector investigations, you may have freedom of information requests. I regularly get freedom of information requests on investigations that we're going in. If you haven't secured legal privilege or it's done in an open environment, then you have to disclose what you've been doing. Most recent of those was those. It sounds odd being recent, and this is all public record. Was that towards the end of last year, I gave evidence on the Battle of Bannockburn, which, for those who know, took place in 1314. So even by Scottish standards, this was running a little bit slowly. What they were doing is they were wondering why, Stirling Council wondered why they'd managed to book the Battle of Bannockburn reenactment on the anniversary of the Battle of Bannockburn, full 30,000 ardent Scots all doing the whole you can take our freedom but you can never take our kilts, or I think I'm misquoting, on there. So you've got 30,000 ardent nationalists. You had Alex Salmond, you had it in the year of the Scottish referendum. And at the same time, the same weekend, they managed to book the British Armed Forces Day, which is essentially the English Armed Forces Day, with David Cameron and everyone else, all arriving in Stirling on the same weekend. So anyway, loads of freedom of information requests on those, many of which were from the Stirling Advertiser. Big publication. Think about HR and employment advice. You do not want to get this wrong. You get the employment stuff wrong, you get wrongful dismissal, you get a claim for any element of discrimination, you can be unlimited payouts sometimes. It's a significant cost, so make sure you get appropriate legal advice. Think about if it's come from a whistleblower. First of all, do you have a policy? If so, have you followed that policy on whistleblowing? If it's supposed to be confidential, the last thing you want to do is go, oh, you, come out here. I think you've been doing the whistleblowing. I need to have a word with you. That, you've got to be really careful about that. Whistleblowers are protected by the PIDA, the Public Interest Disclosure Act. So they have they really are protected as organisations. So you have to be, as individuals, so you have to be very, very careful that if someone's blowing a whistle, that you treat them correctly and appropriately. Now, we have a different attitude in the UK as we do in the US. There is an individual who blew the whistle on one of the frauds relating to some of the subprime mortgages that had gone on in the US. And in the US, although that individual was sentenced to 30 months in prison, that individual, because they had blown the whistle on things, not just got a reduced sentence, they also got a proportion of the recovery of the assets. The assets that were recovered in that particular case were over $4 billion. That individual did 30 months in prison, but the US, because of the way the system works over there, that whistleblower got $100 million. Secure the data. Now, where is it? Where is the data stored? You think about paper data, you think about electronic data. You've got individuals who are looking at their livelihood, they're looking probably at their family, they're looking at problems going forward. You've got to think that they are very likely to try and take some kind of action. They may well sit there and try and shove a lighted newspaper through a door. They would quite happily burn down premises in order to secure and safeguard their own future. So make sure that when you've got financial evidence that you are securing it, if necessary, off-site, held elsewhere. Think about taking an image of any IT equipment, making sure that you're properly securing all that information technology, making sure that you're getting a proper position, using computer forensics. Don't try and do it yourself, don't do a clone yourself, try and get someone professional in. And think about what data could be relevant. There was a case I investigated where we were looking at the construction of garden sheds. Those garden sheds, we found a certain proportion were being sold, but it just felt something felt wrong. There was around about £4 million going through the books that we could see. And then we looked at the production records. So it wasn't the financial records, it was just what was being produced. And we found the production record showed that they were producing around about £5 million worth of sheds. So there was a gap. And then when we investigated further, we found out that there were no sales for cash. Nobody was buying their garden shed and coming up and handing over a couple of £100. So what we found is that the entire cash of that business was being sucked away and being put into the finance director's back pocket. So what are the data? Don't just think about pure financial information. Don't just think about the computers. Think about information around the outside. Reporting to action fraud. Action fraud, if you Google, I want to report a fraud, action fraud is the first thing that will come up for you. Action fraud is a government-backed organisation, however, is essentially just a call centre. What you do is you ring up and you make certain points, and points win prizes. So if you ring up and you know that Chris Clements has sat there and nicked 100,000, you ring up and you go, Chris Clements has nicked 100 grand from me. They go, that's great, that's fantastic, right? You've got Chris Clements, that's 1 point. You've got 100 grand, right? That's 2 points. Anything else? And you go, no, you've got that smug sense of satisfaction, you've reported it to action fraud, good, you put it down. They go, right, that's 2 points. You need 14 points for a call to action to call the police in. Bang, that's gone. That's slightly oversimplifying it. But essentially, if you are calling action fraud, you need to make sure you give them as much information as possible. You ring up, you go and say, right, it is Chris Clements. He is a partner at Grant Thornton Accountants. Looking on the internet, his email address is such and such. He works with a series of people. His office address is Whitehall, Riverside. He does this, this, and this. That will get you extra points. The more details you can give. He was giving the lecture on the 17th of February. He was there on floor 2. Bang, 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 they're getting loads and loads of points. You will get a call to action. So if you are reporting to action fraud, you need to give as many, many details as possible. And that will ensure that you get a call to action from your police force. You have to think about PACE at this point. PACE is the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. What it means is as soon as you have reported a fraud to action fraud, technically and you have received a call to action, so your local police officers have been summoned and you've been given a crime number, It becomes a criminal investigation. At that point, if you are interviewing someone, you need to think about cautioning them. So you have the right to remain silent. Anything you can and do will be said in the court, etc., etc. All that usual stuff. And if you get that wrong, again, there is another get out of jail free card, quite literally, for the criminal if you've given that caution incorrectly. If you start interviewing people without using PACE after this point, then you can be doing it. So be very careful about when you report it to Action Fraud. Don't immediately report a fraud to Action Fraud. Make sure that you try and stop things as quickly as possible. Do some background research. Again, thinking about who. Remember that I said if you want to just report Chris Clements, you want to Chris Clements from Grant Thornton, Whitehall, Riverside. Think about all those addresses, all those important things. Think about what his email address is. Do some basic research. And it's amazing what you can uncover about individuals. There was a fraud from 2 years ago that I dealt with here in Leeds, where if the individuals had actually done a Google check on the employee who just nicked from them, they would have found he had not one, not two, but 3 previous convictions. 2 of which were from the same firm, who actually felt sorry for him after the first time. And he'd gone, oh yeah, no, I didn't mean to, and they re-employed him, the idiots. 3 previous things. Those who've heard me before will know the public sector example that I had, where there was a business that was paid £4 million. £4 million to 2 brothers, who then absconded with all the cash. If they checked the identities of those brothers, just a Google search. Now, again, if you Googled yourself, I used to Google, when I first started doing these talks, and it showed how long ago, it was Chris Clements. You Google Chris Clements, and you got a Christian country and western singer in America. She was very pretty, it was very nice, but it wasn't me. Now, there's a Peterborough footballer. I can see you're not impressed, but there's also a cage fighter. Oh yes, in my free time, there I am. So, you Google yourself. Anyway, I digress. Those individuals, you Google those individuals. If they Googled them, they would have found item number 1 that appeared on Google. So item number 1, not sort of on page 2, page 4, something like that. Item number 1 was X and Y convicted of supply of amphetamines to Australia. They controlled the supply of speed for Australia. These are seriously bad boys. It gets worse. Item 2 was X and Y. Escape from prison in helicopter. Item number 3, X and Y extradited back from UK government. Item number 4 should have been X and Y then given £4 million by stupid public sector organisation. But it wasn't. So think about relationship, think about things that are out there. Who else are they with? Who else could be involved in it? There's a fraud I've got to be quite careful with at the moment that I'm looking at, where there is a junior employee under investigation, and everyone's going, yes, definitely it's her. But I'm still not 100% convinced, because actually she's had a lifestyle, she's done reasonably well out of all of this, but I'm not convinced she's had all the money. She's stolen somewhere around about £5 million. I can only see maybe 600,000-700,000. She's taken her family on holidays and a few other bits and pieces. She's paid off her mortgage, but she's not really particularly flash about this. But her boss, he's a nasty bit of work. Anyway, so I'll maybe next year, if I'm invited back, Paul, that's a hint. It's like Scheherazade, keep them going, 1,001 nights, don't tell them the end, keep them going. Invite me back, I might be able to tell you what happens in the end on that one. Anyway, so think about who they're related with, what other people might be benefiting, what sort of things you have to do. Think about what's happened in the past, and are there any other issues around that fraud that might need looking into. Then properly reporting the findings. You've got to record all your decisions. If you're investigating, you have to record your decisions. Again, this comes down to the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. If you're securing evidence, you have to have a decent reason to go into people's personal records. You have a decent reason to go through the papers. You have a decent reason to go through their computer. You have to be able to have a sensible reason. You have to have a reasonable suspicion. And you also have to have the decision. And you have to think about recording why and what you're looking at. So you've got to put it as wide as possible. And if your objectives are just to investigate a fraud, that will be fine, because that's a very wide thing. However, if you're just doing, I'm just investigating Chris Clements' £100,000 fraud, then my clever lawyer will sit there and get it off when you try and find another £5 million that I've nicked. So they'll try and say, because you extended your investigation beyond what you were actually supposed to be doing. You've got to think about where you're going with it. Now remember what I said right at the start when I was talking about investigations, that what you need to think about is what your outcome wants to be. If you just want someone out of that business, you might not want to go to that criminal thing. You might not want to be on the front page of the Yorkshire Post. You might want to keep it nice and quiet. You want to just push things down, keep it going. You want the person out of that business, that's right. But they've squandered it. They've gambled on the horses. They've spent it on the loose women. They've taken the drugs. They've done the lot. Nothing is left. It is all gone. So there's no point in doing it. But if you have an appropriate insurance policy, you may get the opportunity to recover some of that money. So you have to think about a civil recovery action, either against the individual for what little is left in their bank account, or alternatively trying to recover money from the insurers. So think about what your insurance policy covers, what's required under a decent insurance policy. So think about what standard of proof is needed. Criminal, beyond reasonable doubt. You have to prove Chris Clements did steal that £100,000. But if on balance of probabilities, Chris Clements probably stole it, that's a civil proof. So different balances of proof between the two. You also need to think about where you're going with it. Do you want to end up in an employment tribunal risking huge amounts of potential fines and payment out to an individual by getting it all wrong? Or do you want to go to the police? Certainly my advice, if the money's gone, if it's been frittered away, first thing you need to do is make sure that when you're getting the individual out that business, it doesn't cost you any extra money. And think about those recovery actions. Civil recovery, Proceeds of Crime Act. There's been a lot of stuff about the National Crime Agency today. It's been in the press that they've recovered, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, they've recovered £30 million and it's only cost them £60 million to actually do it. It's not as bad as it sounds, honest. Well, that's what the guy on the telly said anyway. Make sure you learn from your mistakes. Make sure that if you do have a fraud, that you do close that loophole. You don't leave that £100,000 sitting on the desk anymore. You don't share the passwords around. That you make sure you do your reconciliations properly. That you have a whistleblowing hotline so you can spot these things. That you pick up and you learn from those mistakes. You make things just that little bit stronger, a little bit better. And that way you can improve your systems and controls. Because the main thing is if you've got systems and controls, you can stop frauds actually happening. And that's the best deterrent. Forget about the whistleblowing, forget about the management, forget about the external audit. Did anyone notice how little external audit actually spotted on that slide? Around about 3%. We should be embarrassed. Anyway, I said final point. I was going to be talking about what would be the cost of fraud. And there's lots of different ways that you can actually look at this. Obviously cost is pure. There's cash that's gone out, it's disappeared. It's been snorted, cooked, whatever with it, it's gone. There's nothing left of it. But there's other areas as well. For larger corporates, you're actually damaging shareholder value. You can have significant reductions. You only have to look at what's happened at some of the major corporates that have been victims of fraud. So again, publicly available information on Serco. They were sitting there, they got caught by, well, in fact, the whistleblower actually got the information to them and they self-disclosed to the government that they had been overcharging for prisoner escorting and prisoner tagging. So they've been tagging not just criminals, but they've been tagging individuals long after they've been released, or at least they were charging the government for it. In one particularly bad case, they've been tagging a dead man for a long period of time. You wouldn't have thought they got very far. I digress again. There was about three things that were done. The final one was really poor. They were fiddling their key performance indicators as well. So it's a minor thing that they were just not quite telling the correct results. The only stupid thing was they were fiddling their KPIs. They were doing it incorrectly, but they didn't hit the key performance indicator. They were fiddling it. They still got it wrong and still missed it. So they didn't get any of the bonuses. Anyway. But they damaged the shareholder value. That business has lost a huge amount of its shareholder value. Roughly 2/3 of that shareholder value has gone in that business. Essentially, it's still there. As virtually the same contracts are still in place. Most of these things are still ongoing, and yet the value to the shareholders has gone significantly. There's also compliance costs. The regulators, the FRC, a serious fraud office. There's things like corporate renewal process. Serco G4S has been forced to go through a corporate renewal process where they've had to undertake 8 specific changes within their organisation. Significant changes have had to take place. So those are important things that have to go through in large corporates. But unquoted businesses. Reduced business value. Businesses that actually would otherwise have been sold for significantly higher amounts of money could have been done. Now some of that, in fairness, is the fault of the directors. I did do a case going back a number of years now where I was approached by a corporate finance team, and I was quite surprised because normally corporate finances aren't interested in forensic accounts. They want to do the deal, they want to get it all done, it's all very exciting. But they said, we're acting for a client that we need to disclose some bad news to the people who are buying their business, who also happens to be their major customer. They sell 70% of their stuff to it. I said, well, what's the bad news? And I'm thinking there's nothing in there for me. Is it, what is it that they've lost a major customer or something like that? How bad could it be? I said, well, the contract with this customer who they're buying for the business is a cost plus contract. So if it costs £100 and they've got a 20% markup, they're allowed to charge £120. I said, well, what's the problem? I said, well, we've kind of been lying to them a bit. I said, how much? I said, well, we may have misled them by about what our costs were by around about 100%. So they'd been fiddling their major customer. So the eventual approach we decided to do was the good news, bad news thing. So which do you want first, boys? You're buying the business. Good news? Good news is costs are way lower than you think. Bad news is we've been nicking. That one got sorted out, but it will impact on business significantly. But ultimately, insolvency. And I've dealt with a number of examples over the years. The example of the sheds. That business went bust. Everyone lost their jobs. The individual who owned it, they lost everything in that that's what they've been building up to. Incidentally, the thing that gave that away, and apologies for those who've heard this before, the thing that gave that away, the reason that the financial director was actually fiddling stuff in there, was that he'd been, him and the managing director had agreed that they were only going to draw a salary of £40,000 a year. That was all. £40,000 a year. It's a nice income, but that's about it. But the managing director spotted the finance director's lifestyle was a little bit tasty, shall we say? And what when he was explaining it to me, he said, I spotted that there was something a little bit wrong when he turned up in his Range Rover. I thought, oh, crikey, £100,000 car, £40,000 salary, doesn't quite work out. I said, was that it? He said, no, his wife's got a brand new BMW convertible. Okay, right, that's not good. Anything else? Yes, his house. He's got a £750,000 house and is just selling it and buying a bigger one. I went, oh, crikey, anything else? So yeah, there's the holiday home in Switzerland. Anything else? He had 3 kids in private school. It just kept on rolling and rolling and rolling. And I said, well, crikey, did you not notice any of this coming? He said, no, I didn't notice anything till he paid for a round of drinks at a wedding reception in cash. You can't, you've got to watch that. Anyway, that wraps up what I was going to talk about. As I said, I promised I'd talk a little bit more about investigations and some of the issues around it. Just a few things to take away. Despite the fact that you are all different in this room, so there's no such thing as a typical fraudster. Watch out for the people who are out there. Remember the psychology and that idea that if you have a way of stopping people having that motive, so you can help them out financially so they don't need to steal money, if you can make things work well for them, that's good. If you can try and give them no opportunity to steal money, then that will help prevent fraud. And finally, if you can set the tone from the top right, then they can't rationalise that the boss is messing them over. Think about those red flags. Think about the behavioural ones, the guys turning up in their Ferraris, in their Maserati with Vince on the number plate, all those points. Think about the cost. What can be the ultimate cost? It damages business, it destroys lives. It is a horrendous thing to actually go through. But then be very, very careful when you're investigating. Do not touch computers. If there's one message you take away, don't touch the computers on investigation.